Switch back here. Gonna give this just a second. Let some people get on here before I get started. Make sure I got everything set up the way I want. Make sure you can hear me. Okay, just doing a test, make sure someone can hear me. Okay, that works. All right, got 4 of you guys on here. It is 9 a.m. So it is time to get started. I'm gonna move a few of my tabs around here just to make sure everything is organized. Refresh a few things. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start right here. Look at our severe weather threat area real fast, and then we'll get into the details of what is kind of going down so far today. So this is the area that the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted for today. For severe thunderstorms, there's kind of an elongated risk that extends from the East Coast through the Mid-Ohio River Valley into the plains. The main threat, though, is focused right here in the plains, where we have an enhanced level 3 of 5 risk centered from basically Wichita down to Wichita Falls, not quite down to Abilene, but this covers northwest Texas through western Oklahoma out into south central Kansas. Surrounding that is a level 2 of 5 slight risk that includes Tulsa, Kansas City, Abilene. You can see that Wichita Falls, Oklahoma City, and Wichita are all in the enhanced risk. Woodward just to the west of that. So it's a fairly focused area where they're expecting the most intense thunderstorms today. And we'll take a look at our specific probabilistics here. So we have a pretty broad area where there's some tornado potential. The highest potential appears to be northwest Texas through western, maybe into central Oklahoma, south central, southeast Kansas, with the lower threat extending off into northwest Arkansas, western Missouri. And then we've got wind threat here. Again, that's highest in western Oklahoma. And then the hail threat the same as well. So there is a chance for damaging winds and hail. I would say wind is the highest threat for today. And then probably hail the secondary threat. And then tornadoes conditional. And I'll get into that actually. Let's just hop right into that. So I'm going to switch to satellite here. And you can see I've still got a risk area highlighted on this map. The thing that I'm noticing this morning, and you know, I always look at this from a storm chasing perspective. So, you know, storm chasing, we're typically looking for conditions that are favorable for severe thunderstorms. So this is not necessarily the look we want to see for the most optimal type of chasing. And what I'm talking about here is all this cloud cover that's coming out of the desert southwest into the plains. This is mid and high level clouds associated with our disturbance that's going to kick off these storms. Sometimes these disturbances have a lot of mid and high level moisture with them. Sometimes they don't. When they do, they typically have a lot of cloud cover. And if that cloud cover is too persistent, too widespread, it's going to limit the sun's ability to heat the ground and therefore destabilize the atmosphere. And looking at this, that gives me reason for concern for how much we're going to destabilize today, because it's a lot of thick cloud cover that's spilling in. Here in eastern Oklahoma, we've actually got a little bit of sunshine filtering through this morning, but there's not a lot even here because these clouds are still fairly thick. And I'll go to a more localized view here into Oklahoma. You can see the risk area, and let's get our counties up here. There are the counties there. Drop that. Okay. So here's Tulsa, here's Oklahoma City. Let me zoom this out. I've got this kind of zoom. Oh, it is 100%. Okay, let's zoom it out just a little bit. Okay. So you can see a lot of clouds here. And you got a lot of high clouds that are filling in as well. And so I don't see a lot of sunshine in our forecast today. I think it's going to be pretty much a cloudy day. That is going to limit how unstable the atmosphere gets. And that is a direct implication on the tornado probabilities specifically. I'm going to switch here. Now we're going to go to the Oklahoma Mesonet. So I'm looking at surface observations. And I will note we are recovering fairly quickly, so this is impressive. This cold front, it lies here basically from about, well, let's see, Hollis, Oklahoma to about Mangum, back up to, Weatherford, El Reno, Yukon, and then it arcs back to the north up through like Blackwell. So the northwest part of Oklahoma is on the north side of this front. And this front was stronger than Prague this morning. We had temperatures in the 40s all the way down here to I-40. But in the last hour, I will say I'm impressed. We're recovering pretty quickly despite the cloud cover. These temperatures are already up into the mid-50s. So we've already warmed here 5 to 10 degrees in the last hour. And we do have temperatures pushing 70 degrees now into southwest Oklahoma or southern Oklahoma along the Red River. And that's because you're starting to get some warm air advection. That's where you're getting the low-level humidity, the tropical air from the Gulf of Mexico. We've got south winds, so that's starting to surge that moisture north, causing it to lift north. And so this boundary is forecast to retreat some, not a whole lot. And again, with the cloud cover, it's not going to just lift north because that cloud cover is going to slow how much heating there is on the north side of this boundary. And no chase, or just less excited. Less excited, maybe no chase. I'm texting someone, Eric, who might be going with me. So anyways, yeah, looking at this surface obs, I mean, you got temperatures in the low 40s here in the Panhandle. So, like, it's going to be really, really hard. You're not going to get much destabilization here because this cloud cover is already the thickest, and it's going to stay pretty much overcast all day. And so down here, you've got a greater chance for destabilization. So, I say a greater chance. I don't think it's going to be massive, but if we are already pushing 70, it stands to reason that, dew points increase. We probably should get up into the mid-70s at least. Here's a look at the broader map. And again, you can see just kind of a quick overview here. You can see this reservoir of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico that is starting to surge north. And then you can see this frontal boundary. This isn't very accurate. I would say the frontal boundary is more like this. But that is going to retreat some today. I would be more excited about the northward advancement of that boundary if we had a lot more heating today. But like I said, going back to this image, you can see on satellite we've got a lot of cloud cover. When I back this out onto the regional view, you can see that cloud cover is extensive, extending all the way back across Texas Panhandle through New Mexico into Arizona. I mean, your clearing line doesn't even, it's pushing through Arizona right now. So that's a long ways to go from there to here. And so the majority of our day is going to be overcast. And so I don't see a lot of heating taking place. So that's going to limit, the biggest thing it will probably do is limit our low-level lapse rate. What a lapse rate is basically how quickly a temperature falls off as you go up in height in the atmosphere. So You know, temperature might be 80 degrees right at the ground, and then you go up a mile and it may be 60 degrees, you know. So the lapse rates, the quicker that temperature falls off, the faster the air naturally will rise. That's your updraft strength, basically. And so you think of it like a hot air balloon. To get a hot air balloon to rise, you have to turn on the burner to heat up the inside of the balloon. And because the balloon is hotter on the inside, hotter air is lighter, less dense than colder air, so the air around it is more dense, and so it just creates a natural lift and the balloon rises. And that's how thunderstorms work. The air inside the thunderstorm is warmer than the surrounding air, and it expands and cools, and that's where the thunderstorm grows, basically. So the low-level lapse rate is how quickly that temperature falls off in about the lowest 1 to 2 miles above the ground. And that's important for tornado formation because tornadoes need to be stretched. The rotation needs to be tilted from horizontal to vertical, and it needs to be stretched into the updraft. And so if you don't have that temperature fall off in the lowest 2 miles of the atmosphere as you go up in height, it limits how effective that stretching is. And so that can limit tornado potential. And I think that may be a limiting factor for today to an extent. I'm not saying that potential is completely zero, because on the flip side of it, we still have wind shear that's going to increase as we get into this evening, and so the wind shear may still compensate some for the lack of instability, because I do think the instability will be lacking to an extent. Some of the model forecasts that we talked about yesterday, the soundings had temperatures in the low 70s today. I still think, and that was in southwest Oklahoma, I still think that is possible, that we still see temperatures make the mid 70s. And I've got the latest data coming in right now. So let's see, this is the morning NAM. And so we can see what it does with the boundary. And I'm going to switch this to temperature. Let me zoom this back in a little bit so y'all can see a little better. Go that far. Okay. So the morning run of the NAM initialized much better with the strength of the cold air versus last night's run even. So at least the NAM has initialized fairly accurate. So I think there might be a little bit more credence to this temperature forecast today here, how this front behaves based on how this is initialized. It looks like it's done pretty well. In fact, it's even got the northward kind of curvature to that boundary, which has been noted. That's kind of interesting, that area right there. But you see how it retreats the boundary north, and it is interesting that it has a localized area here where the temperatures do not warm. And that may be worth noting. That's in it. Well, it does lift that area north, and then you have storms develop there. So it does warm temperatures here in the mid 70s, 76, 77. That makes sense. If you've got temperatures already pushing 70 degrees along the Red River here at 9 in the morning with cloud cover, you're probably going to get a boost in temperatures. And the reason you can do that is because you're increasing the humidity. The temperature always is higher than the dew point, so the humidity can never be above 100%. So if the humidity just keeps going up, well, the temperature is going to keep going up as well. So as we increase the moisture, the temperature is naturally going to warm, even if we have limited heating today. So let's see here. Give me 1 second, switching up what I'm looking at here. I just kind of want to look at a few soundings this morning. Okay, share this tab instead. So we're going to look at soundings. So this is Norman. Make sure that's what we're looking at. Okay. This is the sounding out of Norman. So this is a balloon sounding. If you followed weather at all, you followed me or anyone else, a lot of weather people talk about soundings and whatnot. So this is just a plot from a weather balloon. Over here on the left, this is the temperature, dew point, wind plot with pressure. And then over here on the right, this is a kind of a top-down view graph of the wind profile. and to the untrained eye, it looks crazy to look at. To the trained eye, it makes sense. So anyways, this is a skew T log P, so it's a skewed graph of the temperature profile. So your temperature range is down here, and then you can see that it basically, like, so let's say here, this is your 0 degrees Celsius, so it's your freezing line. So down here at the bottom, so if you want to trace the plot on the graph, you just follow the line to your other line here. So this is the actual temperature that the weather balloon recorded, plotted, and then this is the dew point plotted, and then over here this is your altitude basically as you go up in height. So it's measured over here on the far left in pressure in millibars, and then over here on the right side of that, that is in kilometers. So a couple things to note on the sounding early is we do have an inversion here. We're pretty stable, kind of on that warm front, if you will. But you've got really steep lapse rates over the top of this. You can see right here we've got over 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer lapse rates, so very impressive lapse rates. Temperatures falling off like 40 degrees Fahrenheit per mile ish, something like that. It's very rapid decrease in temperature, and you've got your freezing levels up here at 11,000 feet. So there's definitely some hell potential here today with some of these storms, especially storms that maybe have more of a supercellular characteristic. If they're able to have embedded mesocyclones, you may have some hail production there. We've got quite a bit of moisture in the atmosphere already, even in Norman. And this is ahead of the high clouds, but your dew point and your temperature aren't too far apart here. So there is quite a bit of moisture content. Air's a little bit drier down through this layer. Moisture depth isn't great here, but again, we're kind of on the boundary. You've already got a little bit of curvature in the hodograph, not a ton there, but like that's a pretty wonky hodograph right now, and that'll get better as the trough gets closer and the wind fields increase. Now here in Dallas, this is more of a classic-ish loaded gun type sounding, if you will. Moisture depth's a little bit to be desired here. You're not even up to 1 kilometer where that dew point falls off a little bit. You have some recovery above that, assuming that's accurate, not erroneous. I would assume it is. A little bit of dry air here, but definitely a moist profile here in the mid-levels at 500 millibars. So we have mid-high-level clouds today for sure, but we saw that on satellite, so it makes sense. We do have a stouter inversion here. Bit of a nose. Obviously you have quite a bit of instability above that, pretty steep mid-level lapse rates there. So those are some things that are working for today. Again, the hodograph, just I wouldn't even worry about that right now. It's not going to let anything like that by this evening. As we work, we're missing a lot of data here, so I'm going to kind of work just with what we've got, really. Again, more steep lapse rates. I'm looking down here in Midland, Odessa. Drier air, but you can see there's that mid-level moisture here. Not as much instability through this layer, but still there's very steep lapse rates. I mean, it is really fairly impressive. And you've also got a warm nose. And kind of, let's go back to El Paso, steep lapse rates, a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. So again, the mid-level moisture is a bit of concern for destabilization. I've gone all the way back here into Arizona. You can see a ton of moisture there. Still steep lapse rates down through this layer, but that's really far west. So pretty strong flow. I mean, you're over 100 knots up through that layer. So that's really impressive. And there's quite a bit of shear aloft coming out with this system, but again, I think the instability is kind of the thing that's really hurting us for realizing a higher end threshold, especially to the tornado potential. I do not see tornado probs going up today. They never drop those probabilities. They kind of hold serve where they're at, even if maybe that threat looks less likely. And there still is potential, and there could be a tornado or 2 or 3 this evening. And really kind of what I'm watching, so going back to the storm chaser standpoint of it, you know, originally thinking maybe targeting down here. I'm not sure I want to do that. It's so early in the year. It is also April Fool's. Go look at the historical data on April 1st in the plains. There's not a lot of tornado days. But if you go to March 31st, there's a lot of tornado days. And April 2nd, there's a lot of tornado days. Joseph Tyree, T-Money did all the homework on that for us. But it's true, man. Like April 1st, it's April Fool's Day. The atmosphere likes, you know, kind of tricking us into thinking it's going to be crazy, and it's usually not. So I think tornado potential is fairly low. If there is potential, I'm kind of switch here. I'm going to go look at the morning run of the HRRR. I want to kind of look and see what it has on temperature here. How it handled. It did pretty good, actually. Yeah. It's done pretty good here. Wait, that's not right. Yeah, there you go. So that 12Z. So the 12Z run analyzed this front pretty well. And I'm going to switch. We're actually going to zoom into Oklahoma here, because that's kind of where the threat area is. So as we go through the day, this is, let's go, I'm trying to get this. Give me 1 second, guys. There we go. Okay, so this is right now, basically, and so you've got temperatures. It has it running about 60 degrees there. So it may be a little bit optimistic on the northward advancement of this front a little bit today. And you can see this is by 4 o'clock, which is kind of when we think the potential for storms may begin to develop. You can definitely see it has somewhat of a boundary here, a thermal gradient of sorts, where you've got maybe a little bit more unstable air to south and east here, slightly more stable to the north. So that may end up being where that front is. And it's wanting to initiate, I can already tell you, it's wanting to initiate storms here near Tulsa. And then it's wanting to initiate storms in southwest Oklahoma. You can just see the footprints. Yeah, you can see, and that's at 0Z. And again, don't take this verbatim, for sure. Like this model changes all the time throughout the day. I've seen it where the model is locked in on a solution. It swears it's going to be a storm here, run after run after run after run, and then you're like about to the time when the storm's going to develop, and it's backed off, and then, you know, it's like doesn't happen. So just kind of looking at this, we go into the afternoon, 4 o'clock. It wants to develop these storms here in eastern Oklahoma, but they're more clustered. It's not showing a lot of organization. You can see all of the ascent coming out with the trough that's kicking off these high base storms, and then here's where the dry line would be. So these would be a player as far as like severe weather, and then anything that develops out through here. So obviously these are the storms that are developing at 6, and then at 7 you got a storm that the HRRR thinks is going to pop up here. I guess it's trying to do the whole March, what was that 5th thing again, where it's like, hey, look at me, you guys are down here and we want to go up here. So the HRRR may be trolling on a solution like this, but that would be along the warm front, so that's worth keeping an eye on, north central Oklahoma. And then maybe up here into southeast Kansas, northeast Oklahoma along the front, wherever that develops. You've got definitely, it's showing some severe weather potential with these cells, or it's generating updraft helicity. And then this is by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, midnight, you're pushing into Tulsa. But if you notice that this model shows the storms most intense is at 7, 8, 9, 10, and then by 11 you start to see a weakening trend. And usually by the time you get to about right here, you're starting to lose your severe thunderstorm warnings. You'll still have some that are severe warned, and then by the time you get here, you're really losing your severe weather potential. And this would be 5Z, so that's midnight. So by midnight, as this is pushing into eastern Oklahoma, that threat really probably falls off. And I think this is fairly realistic. Like, this is kind of how I expect it to go down. I really expect, like, if you're in Tulsa, I expect the threat tonight to be worse. highest to our west. And in fact, if anything, our highest severe weather threat may actually come with this initial activity that develops late this afternoon, if it organizes at all. If that were to organize, maybe that has your highest severe weather threat, because this line looks like it's going to be weakening as it comes in, and that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to go ahead and move to the latest run here, so just see how that's coming in. Kind of looking at some of the cams here. This one only goes out to 4 o'clock, but you can see by 4 it has that ascent moving over us, or moving into the southern high plains, and so that will be leading to the development of storms. And so again, I'm curious to see if it wants to develop something here in north central Oklahoma out ahead of the dry line along the warm front. And if you're weakly capped, which is what the Storm Prediction Center had talked about, then it's possible you could get a storm to form on the warm front like that. And if that were to happen, then there might be some tornado potential with that this afternoon and evening. So that's a potential target to keep an eye on. Again, I'm not sure how that's going to transpire, but with that warm front slowly lifting north into northwest Oklahoma, if I were to chase today, that may actually end up being what I target. I haven't decided whether I'm going to go out or not. I'm trying to skip out on chasing days that are junk. And because of how clouded over we are today, and I'll kind of go back to the beginning of this. Again, looking at our satellite, we've got a lot of clouds pushing in out of the desert southwest with the upper low. The upper low is back over here, and it's moving this way. And this is our threat area, and you can see all this mid and high clouds. And it's all pushing to the east. And so that's going to limit how much sunshine that we see across our risk area. And so that's going to limit, to an extent, the severe weather potential. That doesn't mean it's not going to be, the storms aren't going to be severe today, because they will, because there's a lot of dynamics with the storm. There's cold air aloft with it. There is quite a bit of wind shear. So there is instability. It's just the low-level instability that you need specifically to get good and low-level mesocyclones cranking and potential tornadoes, like that's a little bit lacking. It appears it will be because of the cloud cover. But when the low-level jet kicks in tonight, and I'll go back here real quick, and we'll look at, just go ahead and look at the NAM. We'll look at our 850s. Because the thing about a low-level jet is it can, when you've got really, really strong winds ripping about a mile above the ground, it can kind of offset the capping, if you will, the inversion near the ground. And you can see, so this is roughly right now, and our winds are out of the southwest, about a mile above the ground. So they're out of the southwest, and you'll see that the jet actually sustains itself through the day a little bit. Like this one hasn't fallen off. But what's real interesting about this is as the next wave comes out, your winds are out of the southwest here, but if you notice, they start to respond. This is at 1 p.m., and then by 4 o'clock, your winds are now out of the south. And so it's a mile off the ground, so those winds turn. We call this backing. When the winds change direction in a counterclockwise direction, so let's say if it goes from a southwest wind to a southeast, we call that backing. If the winds change direction from in a clockwise direction, we call that veering. So if you go from a southeast wind to a southwest, that would be a veering wind. And so these winds over time, they back. They turn from southwest to southeast. And that's because the next wave coming out, it's kind of like a vacuum cleaner, if you will. And as that thing's coming out, everything is starting to suck into that low pressure. And so you see the new low spinning up here into eastern Colorado by 7 p.m. tonight. And so those winds, again, the brighter the colors, the more intense the winds. So once you get into these, I guess, yellows here, you're getting above 30 knots. And you can see that it tails off, but then from 4 to 7, boom. All of a sudden you've increased your winds to 40 knots here, and then by the time you go to 10 o'clock, watch what happens. Boom. You're over 50 knots of low-level jet, so you have a really strong low-level shear. and that persists into the night, it increases further. But by this point, your storms have kind of outlived what they're the instability in the atmosphere, and so they'll be in a weakening trend. Outflows will be kicking out despite the low-level jet. But through that mid to late evening into the early overnights, when that threat for severe weather will probably be high. So I would say the severe weather threat maximizes 7 to probably about midnight. I think that's kind of the zone where most of the activity will happen. If there are tornadoes, I think most of that will be kind of in south central Oklahoma. As that line kind of organizes, if you have any embedded supercells, they're able to kind of sustain themselves, and they get some good nudgers, some favorable mergers. Then you could have some embedded supercells producing tornadoes. But from a chasing perspective, this isn't an exciting setup for storm chasers. You're not going to get photogenic storms today because of cloud cover, a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, so the storms are going to be kind of grungy. That's why I'm kind of thinking about sitting back and maybe not chasing today. I may play the warm front. If I think that there's a storm that could pop on the warm front in north central Oklahoma, I may take a couple-hour drive west and give that a shot. So, but other than that, I think wind. There's going to be some wind. There's going to be some hail, especially if there's an embedded supercell, and there'll probably be a tornado or 2 or 3. Lower end. I don't think this is going to be a high-end tornado event. I don't think this will rival what we saw at the beginning of the month in Oklahoma. I don't think the storm system has really evolved in such a way that that makes this a higher-end type of day. And even that day wasn't that high-end, but we did have fatalities with those storms, and I'm hopeful that this time around we will not. So, just you guys watch the weather warnings, this evening. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure that you're, taking proper shelter if you're in a warning, and just use, some basic common sense, and you should be fine. If you are driving tonight and you end up in a tornado warning, seek shelter. Don't stay in your car. It's hard to find tornadoes at night. Even for trained storm chasers like myself, it can be very difficult figuring out where a tornado is. And if you don't know how to find one at night, then it's nearly impossible. So, I will get back on here tomorrow, and we'll talk about Friday. I'm not going to worry about Friday right now because we've got today's activity, which will dictate tomorrow's activity, and then we'll see where we're at after tomorrow, looking for Friday. But the main storm system comes out on Friday. I will do this. We'll go over it real quick just to show you the risk, because they have changed that risk a little bit here. Let me switch. Let's go to do this one. I'm going to do SPC. The SPC won't let me be. Okay, so here's the threat for Friday. So if you remember yesterday, that threat was a lot smaller in the 4-day outlook. They've expanded it. It does include Oklahoma City, Tulsa, it would be Enid, Wichita, Kansas City, barely touches into Springfield, and then it would be up in the highest threat is up here in north central Missouri, southern Iowa. And this may be where the highest tornado threat is on this day. The wind profiles with the boundaries suggest more of a linear mode, more of a line mode with storms, so less of a tornado threat down here, more of a damaging wind threat more than anything, it appears. Maybe some hail threat, but still it's something that we'll watch because we got a couple days to go still. So, but that's Friday's threat. After that, we get a cold front, things will quiet down, and then maybe in another week or so we see the pattern reemerge with more severe weather beyond that. But it's anybody's guess at this point. But for today, just keep an eye on the weather, and we should be fine. So I thank you guys for tuning in, and like I said, I'll probably be back on here tomorrow. I'll give you guys an update when I'm ready to do that. So thank you guys, appreciate it.